started. Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome to the, February month
Yeah.
live show for the Read and Color Book Club. I am Jenny, as you guys know, and I have the lovely Livy here today to discuss The City We Became by N.K.
hmm
Jemisin with us. I know a lot of you have been reading this and discussing on Fable, and so today we're going to go through our full thoughts and discussion and just dig deep. I'm very, very excited for everyone's thoughts on
We
this.
have a drop right
But
here.
as but as people sort of trickle in, I'm going to let Livy sort of describe what the book is about for anyone who's like clicking on this live and being like, "What is this?" So go ahead, Livy.
Exactly. Yes. So, hi everyone. I'm super excited to be joining for this book club. Let me give you. We're obviously doing The City We Became, and this is kind of, to me, it felt like a love letter to New York, but it's also like these. It's human avatars that like make up New York City. And they are, New York City is this living, breathing entity. And there's also kind of this like evil, like darker force that's lurking. And the different boroughs of New York kind of have to band together. And I would also I was reading this, I was like, okay, this is like sci-fi fantasy. Would you agree that it was like
Yeah,
sci-fi?
yeah, definitely
Because
like sci. I would say more towards sci-fi because of like the way things end up being structured. But yeah,
yeah, yeah, it started, I guess I even knowing the plot, I guess originally I thought it was more fantasy, and then I was like, "Oh,
yeah, me
this is
too.
very sci-fi." So that was
Yeah.
very cool, and yeah, that's kind of what the book is about.
Yeah, you did a great job of describing it. And funnily enough, I feel like when I first heard about this book, and even when I was describing it to everyone in like the announcement video for the Reading Color Book Club, like announcing the picks, I kept saying like I know barely anything about this, but it seems
Yeah,
cool. I want to read it. And that was kind of my vibe going into it. And I feel like as you get into the book, there's actually like a specific plot and like stuff
yeah,
going on, which I didn't actually expect, I think
that's
based off
funny
of how little I knew.
because I also went into it blind. Like I think I reached a point where if I know I'm going to read the book, and especially if I like the author, I just won't even bother like reading what it's about first before
Yeah,
I pick it up. I kind of just like to be surprised. And I kind of just went in with like no plot, just vibes, just from the cover, just vibes. Yeah,
absolutely. I know. And this is like a stunning cover as well. And I also feel like it really embodies sort of the vibe of the book and what it's about.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just gonna look through comments here.
And
Everyone's
take
saying
a moment to admire
hi.
it. Yeah. Oh, hi
Hello,
everyone.
everyone. So many people. Yes, it's definitely like kind of an urban fantasy for sure. Alrighty. So I have asked you all to let me know if you've read the book or not before, we get into spoilers, just to get a sense. So you have quite a few hearts in here, which means quite a few of you have read it. Just
Oh,
vibes is the best way to read.
yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Because you
Feel
have
like
like
what
zero
I could do,
expectations, I feel
it
like.
could, like honestly, if the whole book just ends up being vibes, like I could forget the plot entirely. I'd be like, that was an excellent book.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. Okay. Yeah, lots of people have read it today. Amazing. Okay, so I guess like let's just get right into it and talk about our general thoughts and also like maybe what we would rate the book as well. Because I don't know anything about what you think about the book,
Yeah.
Libby, so I'm curious. So
Okay,
want to go
I'll
ahead
start us
first?
out. I honestly really love this. I think mainly I'm like a plot person. I love a neat concept. And from beginning to end, it was just like the concepts were kind of mind-blowing to me. Just like
Yeah.
the scenes that would play out, I would just pause and think, is this really happening? And what an interesting way to describe X, Y, and Z. I just thought this was so creative. And
Hmm.
like even if there were any little like honestly at the top of my head I can't really think of like the cons, just the things that I like stand out to me at the moment.
Hmm.
um it's just it was so creative, and I just think that's so neat. And also, hold on, I'm trying to like, we're still in non-spoiler territory, so
Yeah.
I'm like censoring myself. But yeah, I think overall I was really impressed by the creativity
Hmm.
and the even like the diversity within the characters. And the fact
Mhm.
that it's all within this one city, it's like
Mhm.
it just seems like there's just such a range of stuff that we're looking at, and I thought it was really cool. And the
Yep.
audiobook was something else.
Oh, yes. I will
I'm
get
so
to that.
glad I listened to all of you who said to read the audiobook, like listen to the audiobook, because I also think that that made me enjoy the book more,
Mhm.
because I genuinely wonder if maybe I would have had a harder time getting into it without the flow of the
Yep.
audiobook. Um,
Yep.
like I genuinely feel like there's certain things that I there's a chance I would have rated the book like lower if I had just done it physically,
Yeah.
honestly. So
Yeah.
yeah. What did you think?
Agreed. Oh my God. I agree with so many things that you said. On the note of the audiobook, 100%. So for context, I went into this book honestly thinking I wasn't gonna enjoy it that
Mm,
much. I was like, I think this is gonna be cool, but I don't think I'm gonna like love it slash enjoy it. But I think it's
I
gonna be really insightful and interesting and that
mm,
kind of thing. And so that's how I sort of started out the book, and I was reading it physically, or rather on the ebook, and I couldn't really get into it like too at the very beginning. But everyone was started talking about like the audiobook, and I was like, "Yeah, maybe I should try this out." And I started getting a little bit further into the book, and then I started the audiobook, and I was like, this is a game changer. I love this. I think just like the way she narrates, also the way it was like produced, like it has the sound effects and stuff. And like the different accents that the narrator would put on, and just the
mhm,
like life that she breathes into the different characters, which like all of that is already there in the content of the book and like the way it's written, but she just like adds another layer.
yeah,
So I absolutely loved it. And as I got into the book, as you were kind of saying, like I thought this would be sort of like an urban fantasy, but it sort of delves into that sci-fi space,
yeah,
which I found so interesting. And I love sci-fi plot twists like the ones that we get in here. I'm not going to spoil too much, but yeah, I loved the way it sort of went. And so in the end, like this was basically a 5-star read for me because not only
yay,
all of those aspects, but I loved the topics and themes that it explored and the different characters that we got. And like you said, it was so diverse as well, which was something I
yeah,
didn't actually know going into the book. And so that was such a pleasant surprise. One thing that was really cool is that one of the main characters is also Tamil. I'm like Sri Lankan Tamil, but the character in the book is Tamil Indian. And just that representation, I was like, oh my God, here for it. And I just got so excited. So I feel like, yeah, just like the message of the story and like all the characters coming together and just the way it was written, there's just so much that I could like rave about, which is why I'm like so excited for this.
yeah,
I think in just general, like out of all the books that I've chosen to discuss for this book club, I feel like this one was the most perfect for
ooh,
what I like envisioned the reasoning of this, book club to be. Like, we're
mm,
trying to read different experiences, ones that you might relate to, ones that are different from you. And I feel like this was one that just really brought all of that together.
this is like
Um,
a pivotal reading color book club pick.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it's the perfect one. And yeah, I just loved it so much. I am gonna go through people's thoughts here. There's quite a
Yeah, I'm
few,
like
so
going through, and I'm really interested in seeing what everyone has to say, whether they thought it was 1 star or 5 star. Like I'm excited. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
We have a few four
because
and fives and a few
yeah,
threes. Yeah, audiobook was amazing. Yes.
that's the thing.
I
Like
can
I
definitely see
feel
that.
like I may have been confused had I not had the audiobook kind of helping me
Me
out.
too.
Because even like having, I don't know, it's just she writes a certain way. Like sometimes there'll be like the paragraphs that like don't end with the period, and it's like they like continue on into the. I
Yeah.
don't know how to describe it. Like sometimes her writing style is a little jarring, and so
hmm
I just honestly reached a point where I was able to just like sit in bed and I was just like letting it go, and I was just it just sometimes like when I'm reading a book, I'm pausing all the time, but I didn't really
Yeah.
have that for this. I think mainly because of the audiobook.
hmm
Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely felt that as I was like when I started it, reading it like physically like on the ebook, I was slightly confused and it was like
Mm,
jarring as you were saying and slightly confusing too, but I think something about the audiobook just like brings a lot more clarity to the story.
mm,
Um at least I felt that way. Okay, quite
yeah.
a few threes.
I also wonder, I think if this
Mhm.
wasn't like the genre that someone was expecting, that maybe
Mm,
it wouldn't vibe well because like I said, like, it kind of came like the sci-fi really showed up as you kept going. I was like, oh, I'm wondering, if
yeah,
someone's not really into sci-fi, maybe it wouldn't be their thing. Maybe it
yeah,
wouldn't be as big of a fan. But for someone who likes that kind of stuff, it was like a pleasant surprise. Because again, I
yeah,
think we both went into it the same, where we didn't really have no, like we didn't really know what it was about. And
yeah,
so I
yeah.
think for me too, like my expectations were kind of just like neutral. I was like, okay, what is this going to
Mhm.
be? And because it like had just things that I couldn't have even imagined, I was like, I like this. I like this.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and it seems like this person, sort of
Let's see.
is realizing that it was more of a sci-fi, which makes sense for why they didn't like it, which I can totally see. Sci-fi
Yeah.
is not for everyone, and I can also see how
Yeah.
this book was could have been confusing as well. Um, yeah.
Because I think it's also like such a grand concept. Like the concept of it
Mhm.
alone is I know, I think it's even just like the visual of some of the scenes, like the action scenes, it's like, what on earth is going on right now?
Yeah,
And for that especially, um, I can definitely see why it would
yeah.
be confusing. There were parts that were literally confusing, or I would pause and go, okay, let me reread this. Like I had
Mhm.
moments like that several times.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I feel like for me in those situations, the way that I really got through this for, like, the confusing bits was where I had to, like, sit down and, like, try to actually imagine it as a
Mhm.
movie and see if that would help, and it did, and throughout the book, I felt like this actually could have been a movie, and it would have been actually really
I'm
cool.
so glad you mentioned that because I think the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
I was picturing like some of the action scenes in particular. I could just see them playing out like a movie. I really could. Like the
Mhm.
special effects and everything. It
Mhm.
was actually giving me, I don't know, something about like the recent like Doctor Strange. I don't know, something like the
Oh,
special effects were kind of like the way I was visualizing some of the special effects.
yeah.
Like some of the stuff that was happening in there. I was like, hmm. And it
Yes.
is Doctor Strange. Does that take place in New York? I'm
Yes,
blanking,
it
but
does, it does. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That one does take place in, New York, which is probably why it feels familiar.
Mm.
Um, yeah, lots of fans of the audiobook here. Um, obsessed. Okay, can feel it.
I think I'd
Too sad
say
because I don't usually
mm,
read stuff like that. Yeah,
hmm.
that makes
I think
sense.
I've seen someone say they need to read it a couple times, and I so
Mm,
agree with that. That's actually that's an interesting thing. I was reading from my, the audiobook and
yeah.
also like this library copy, and I regret using the library copy because I like to annotate. I like to write in my books, and I was like,
Yeah.
darn, I should have just got this book because now like I know, I feel like it's sometimes it just sticks more for me when I'm annotating the book, and so
Mhm,
I look forward to, like, rereading it and annotating it
mhm.
properly, like, with my thoughts
Yeah,
as I go through it. Um, yeah.
yeah, I totally agree. I was listening to the audiobook, but I was also following on along on the ebook copy I borrowed from the library.
Mm,
But thankfully, even if you borrow the copy from the library, on your e-reader, you can still like highlight stuff and it'll like
yeah.
give you a record of what you've highlighted. And I still have the hold, thankfully. So I was
Alright.
able to like go back like through some of like the stuff I highlighted and it definitely helped. But I 100% feel this person who like you need to read it another time to like see if you
Yeah,
actually enjoyed it because I feel the same about any book that sort of confuses me. I need to like, give it another go before I would
and I
be
feel
able
like
to
what
figure it out.
happens for me a lot of times with books is, like, in the days after reading them, because I've just finished this very recently, like,
Mhm.
I'm kind of in a little bubble, and then it'll be like days later, and my thoughts will start to shift. I'll be like, did I like that as
Yeah.
much? Or oh, I really like it'll be days later, and I start rethinking. So that's why I especially look forward to doing like a reread, seeing what I think
Mhm.
on a second go, because
Mhm.
especially with I don't know, I feel like my thoughts change all the time on particular books. Like I could be saying one thing right now, and then I'm like, maybe I'll feel a little differently in a few days. But right now, I liked it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that so much.
Mhm.
I also wish I wanted to
Yeah,
annotate.
right?
Definitely watch this as a movie. Yep. I agree. Okay, I'm gonna ask you all to let me know what your favorite aspect of the book and least
Hmm.
favorite aspect of the book was. And then we'll also answer here while we wait for answers to roll in.
Okay.
Olivia, do you want to go first? Like, what was your favorite thing
Let's
about this?
let's see.
And then least favorite.
I'll sit
Feel
on
free
this one
to
for a second. Let me
mention
see.
a few.
Hmm.
I can go first if you want.
Okay,
You want
yeah.
to? Yeah. Okay.
There's a couple I'm like
Um,
I'm very indecisive.
no, I feel that. Obviously, there's a lot of things that I liked about this. I think so. If I had to like choose my favorite aspects, one was like the diversity and sort of like the look into the various sort of stereotypes and challenges that the different characters face. And
Mhm.
how also like I loved how intersectional this book was.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that is like all these characters are marginalized in some way, but there's a different levels and sort of
yeah,
intersections in their marginalization that affect their lives. And so we're seeing those sort of brush up against each other. So I loved that and all of the discussions about that and the way that they play out on page.
yeah,
And then I also personally just really loved the sci-fi like Easter
yeah.
eggs that we sort of get and the reveals that we got later on and how this actually was more of a plot driven book than I expected it to be. And I really
Mm,
actually liked it. And it had just so many like great references and like fun things. Um,
yeah,
and this is where I'm going to say, everyone, we're going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, leave now and come
yeah.
back and watch this when you have.
But thanks for
Um,
joining while you were here, yeah.
yeah. But
Um,
there was just like so many fun little things that I just loved. Do you want to go with your favorite aspect
yeah, as I was
first?
remembering something that stood out, honestly, from, like, the first, I can't remember if it was in the prologue or the one of the first chapters, but
Hmm.
it's the way the action scenes play out with, like,
Hmm.
using like, fighting with the city and, like, how,
Hmm.
the bridge was destroyed and how, like, just the way everything played out. That was my favorite part, like, visualizing that
Hmm.
was just something very unique. I'd never really read anything like that where
Yeah.
the city is doing the fighting and the city shifts and, like, when there'd be a little comment about how, "Oh, the citizens probably just thought there was an earthquake," and
Hmm.
or they thought it was like the metro was rolling by or something. But really,
Yeah.
they're having these entire battles. I just thought that was so neat. And
Yeah.
I also just, I don't know, there's something about like these grand, like natural disaster type stuff. I think that's also kind of similar to like the fifth season and like just like these big
Mm.
kind of like catastrophic events that will sometimes happen.
Okay.
I don't know if she has a thing for that, but I don't know when it's just like these big scenes would happen. I thought that was
Yeah.
very neat.
Yeah.
Um,
No. 100%.
yeah. And I'm gonna sit and think on the least favorite because it's funny. I'm like trying to think of a least favorite thing in
Yeah.
particular because right now it's like the things I
Yeah.
like are standing out.
Yeah. No, for sure. And sorry, on the note of you just like saying like the big battle scenes and how like, the regular people wouldn't like notice it. This is one of the things that I love about I feel like it's been a long time since I've read an urban fantasy or like, one of those books, sci-fi fantasies that sort of have these magical or strange things going on, but like in our real world. It's been a
Yeah.
while since I've read one of those and I love those stories. I feel like those are the stories that end up being really popular, like things like, Harry Potter or like Percy Jackson, like
Mm,
things that are set in our real world but have this magical on the side.
mhm.
And people love the idea of that. And I love seeing that in this.
Wasn't
Um, but
I think City of Bones is in New York too,
yes,
right? Like where
City
it
of
was
Bones, yeah, the
filmed.
Mortal Instruments, yeah,
And
urban
that was prime
fantasy-ish
middle school and
things.
high school
Yeah.
content for me.
Yeah, so I feel like this is like sort of like an adult version of some of those stories for me. One that
Mhm,
was like a little bit more, nuanced and everything, which I loved.
mhm.
Um, and was just so cool. But on the note of least favorite thing,
Yeah.
this is hard for me, but I think it would be like I think my least favorite thing is also like my favorite thing, which or one of my favorite things, which is the way that the book was written. Um,
Mm.
I think it was both like it really added to the story, but it also really takes you out of the story because you got
I
to like
see.
parse it.
Mm,
Um, and so had I only been reading this like without the audiobook, I feel like I would have been confused the entire time and sort of had a
mhm.
tough time with this. But because the audiobook has sort of helped me through it. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like the writing style is something that could like make or break the book for
Mm.
someone. Yeah.
No, I totally see
Mhm.
that. For Miley, someone just made a comment, I think it was Sheridan,
Mhm.
And that kind of I actually agreed in that, like, the
Mm,
ending just kind of yeah, it just all started happening real quick and, like,
yeah.
all t condensed, and I think I realized, like, uh I don't know, I like it when the end is all lengthy, like, we get, like, everything happening,
Mm,
we get every stone there's, like, nothing left unturned, but then I realized also, like,
um,
this is, um this is supposed to be book 1 in a series, no?
is it? Okay, this is something I wanted to ask at the end of the
'Cause
live show.
I think I'd only
Yeah.
just seen that, and so, it was making me kind of, like, rethink how I
Mhm,
felt about, like, I don't know,
mhm,
just how I felt like it was concluded. Because sometimes I feel like the ending is a little different depending on if it's a standalone or if it's, like, book 1 in a
mhm.
series, and so I could see how, like, she set it up for there to be more,
Yeah.
but I also wasn't sure the whole time. I was like, "Is this a series or is it not?"
I do vaguely remember seeing that, like, the series title for this is, like, The Great Cities or something like
Oh,
that,
it
and I
must
have
be.
a vague feeling that, like, the next book is based off of another city,
Mm.
potentially? Or this is just maybe me projecting what I think it'll be, but yeah. No, I can totally see that though, about the ending. It's funny though, because I feel like it's like, one of the things that I've noticed depending on the person, they either, like, um will like it or not. Like I'm personally the type of person who loves like the buildup of any sort of narrative. Like even with a romance, I love the buildup, but then like I don't really care after they get
Oh,
together.
that's so funny. That's so
Right?
funny. I think I'm the opposite of you, but that's
Yeah.
very funny.
Yeah. So like to me, this was like, the buildup was so great and like, okay, they beat the monster, everything's fine at the end. Okay, I don't
Let's
really need
wrap
to
it
see
up.
more of that happily ever after. So I was kind of fine with it, but I love that.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, I'm just gonna go through and see everyone's comments. Okay. Favorite aspect was a large cast. Least favorite was the confusion. Totally get that. Oh, the parts with the painting and the photos. Yeah. I really agree with that being a very confusing part because I was confused as well.
We're talking about
Um,
the paintings, like, of
in
the avatar, who
the
I'm realizing never really had, like, a name, right? It's just the
Yeah,
avatar,
I
like,
think
the primary one?
yeah, that one and also like the annoying white guys.
Oh, yeah.
And their
Yeah.
paintings and how, like, Branca's, like, sort of seeing into a different world, and
Mhm.
that part, like, totally threw me off. I actually had to reread, like, part of that chapter to
Yeah.
get what was
Yeah,
going
like,
on.
you completely jogged my memory. I was like, "Oh, yes,
Yeah.
those paintings."
Yeah. Yeah. Love the characters, the diversity was amazing, super well researched. Yeah, I totally agree. Super well researched. She threw in so many, like, interesting little details that are, like, you could unpack like, you could sit there and unpack this and
Yeah.
write, like, a whole chapter about this, but she just threw it in as, like, a little
Mhm.
thing. Um, but part of that also makes the plot a little confusing, yeah.
Of course. But, yeah, I feel like the confusion comes with just, like, the big grand concept. Like,
Yeah, the scope
sometimes
of it.
I just reach a point where I'm like, "Okay, this is gonna be c I think it's just like a sci-fi thing, honestly, like, there's a
Yeah,
level of confusion that tends to come, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, I
I think
agree.
what was it? There's, like, some, I think it was a meme or a TikTok I've seen. It was, like, when you first start a sci-fi book,
Yeah,
and it's just, like, gibberish for the first, like, couple chapters,
yeah,
like, what is like
yeah. That's exactly it, and what I love I mean, like, personally, I know my viewers sort of know this, but I personally love sci-fi fantasy. But one thing I love about it, even though it can be confusing and stuff, like, at the beginning, it's one of those things where, like, if you come back to it, there's so much to, like, unpack and, like, mine
Mhm,
afterwards, which is, like, it kinda makes
'cause
it
it
worth
went over
it,
your
you
head
know?
the first time.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I grew up in New York
Ooh.
and metro area, and seeing the way the boroughs were represented was so fun. Yeah, that was something I was thinking the entire time. I was like, if I was from like, I know New York, I've been there quite a few times, but I am no by no means like know it really, really well. But I was like, if I was from New York, this would be so cool.
I
Yeah.
definitely that's such a great point. I was wondering this whole time too. I was like, I want like all of the people from New York to review this book, and I want to see what
Yeah.
y'all think about, just how she fictionalized New York. I have
Hmm.
only been there like on short visiting, like, little
Hmm.
trips.
Same. Yeah.
And ever like the two times that I went, it felt like I hadn't even glimpsed like a fraction
Mhm.
of all that was there. Like
Yeah.
it's just so much over there. But
Yeah.
that's really nice to see, Sheridan,
Yeah.
that you enjoyed the representation of that.
Absolutely. Favorite aspect was the names of the characters and how their personality
Oh yeah,
matched.
the names.
Yeah. Those are fun,
I
yeah.
felt kind of slow at first when I didn't realize that Manny was Manhattan until he said that. I was like, how did I not piece that together?
Yeah. I mean, like, Brooklyn was the most obvious one, and, like,
Mhm.
Bronco was pretty obvious too. Yeah, man I mean, like, also, though, when we meet Manny, it's, like, very early on, so we're not totally
Yeah,
aware of the Avatar situation, so it's understandable.
yeah.
I totally agree with you, though. I hated how long the chapters were. They were way too long for me. They were, like, whole like, they could be their own novellas, each one of
Mhm,
them. Yeah. Definitely. Love the fact that everything with the team didn't just fall
mhm.
together perfectly. Yeah. Oh, yes,
I
for sure.
agree. I it sometimes it seems too easy the way things work out, and, they
Mhm.
didn't it didn't it didn't work right away for them, and I think you're absolutely right on that
Yeah,
point.
yeah. And you can definitely tell that, like, sort of the way that N.K. Jemisin wrote this book, it was less about, like, trying to fit these characters into a plot and rather, like, letting these characters fill the plot.
Yeah.
That makes
Mm,
sense? Like, she let the characters you know, live and breathe and do their thing. And they all rub up against each other, which I love. It was so
mhm.
interesting because like the characters who I thought would get along with each other ended up not liking each other. Like Bronca and Brooklyn, I thought they would be like besties, but
As
nope,
soon as you said
they
it,
did
I was
not
like,
like
"Oh
each
my gosh,
other.
wrong." I was like, "They don't
Yeah.
get along."
Yeah. And it was like
I was like,
interesting to
"Oh
see them sort of
no."
talk about their issues with each other and stuff. And then we obviously like learn more, which was
Yeah,
very interesting. So cool. Characterizations of the boroughs. Yeah, super creative and original idea, I
yeah.
think. Yeah,
Looking
yeah.
into it just because I was a bit confused. On the stereotypes, oh, that reminds me of something.
Mhm.
We're in spoiler territory, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Go for
Um,
it.
there's a lot of stuff about that came up about Lovecraft, like H.P. Lovecraft, and
Yes.
that was very interesting because have you heard of or read the Ballad of Black Tom?
So I have not, but I know like vaguely about like H.P. Lovecraft and how he's like a
Yeah,
raging racist and all
I
that. Yeah.
recommend it, and it was because, I wanted to read that someone recommended that I read the Lovecraft story it was based on called The Horror at Red Hook, and so
Oh.
that's the only one that I've read, and that is, like, one of the most racist ones, like, very xenophobic,
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
like, I mean, the story is, like, based on, like, this fear of foreigners in New York and,
Yeah.
like, the description of them, and so
Yeah.
when that started being brought up, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is very neat because it's, like, calling
Yeah.
it out," but it's just I felt like this was the perfect space to, like, bring that up,
Yeah.
and it kept coming up, and I just thought it was neat.
Yeah, and it was so cool because I feel like most of people would have gotten this, but maybe you didn't if you don't know like the H.P. Lovecraft stuff. But the woman in white who we
Mm,
meet and like who's basically our villain in the story, we find out her real name is Relia, or
yes.
Relea, and that is the name of the city that Cthulhu is from, which is like this
Yeah,
monster that was written about by H.P. Lovecraft.
and it's like
So
I
like
haven't read
the
that original
entire
story,
thing.
but, I've heard, like, you started be I it's funny when I was like, well, first of all, I was like, "What's her name?" When she first whispered it in the ear, I
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, come on, what's her name?" Um, but then, yeah, when she eventually said it, I was like, "Oh, that reminds me a lot of something." Then I had to Google it real quick. I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
makes sense, right in
yeah,
line with all the Lovecraft stuff," which I thought
yeah.
that was pretty neat.
Yeah, it was definitely so cool, and, like, sort of the way she takes that and, like, extrapolates from it, and, this fictional city from H.P. Lovecraft ends up being, like, the villain in this story,
Mhm,
which I just
mhm.
thought yeah, it was so cool. All of the little different interconnections and stuff was insane. Just gonna go through a little bit more of these comments.
Yeah.
Thought the different characters were
I
well
love
written,
reading
love the
everyone but thanks
diversity.
everyone for being here. I love reading
Mhm.
everyone's comments right now, like
Yes. Okay, I can see this. There are aspects of the sci-fi which didn't feel fleshed out, and I wanted more detail. I can. I feel like there a part of this book was like trying to keep the mystery alive throughout, and
Mhm,
so because of that.
It
Like
was
we don't,
mystery. Mm.
yeah.
Now, Hannah, I wonder if you're still around. I wonder, do you think that you would read number 2? Like, do you think that you would get more of that sci-fi, do you think that would happen more in book 2? I'm curious. I guess that's a good question for everyone. Like, does that,
Yep.
now, assuming that there's a book 2, do we plan to
Yeah.
continue on to book 2? I would be picking up book 2 if there's a book 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that's usually a question I ask like towards the end, like, as a
Yeah.
wrap up, like what do we think? But I would love to hear for everyone's answers right now. I personally like didn't realize throughout the book that like it might be part of a series, but
Mhm.
like afterwards it makes sense, especially because we get so many little tidbits from or like we get the other city characters is what I'm trying to say, like
Yeah.
Hong Kong and Sao Paulo. And we are learning about how like the woman in white has been like orchestrated, the enemy has been
The whole
orchestrating all of
thing,
these
yeah, all over the
things,
place.
yeah, all over the world. So it's like a much bigger thing.
Yeah.
I just wonder if I will enjoy it as much if it's not set in New York,
Yeah.
because part of what I loved about this book was like, the New York vibe and like, getting to know these characters. And now I'm like attached to these characters, so I kind of want more
Mhm.
of them, but maybe she'll be able to get me to like connect to the
Right,
other
now that's making
characters.
me wonder, I'm like,
Yeah.
what city would she pick to
Hmm.
feature this one? And speaking of the cities, I thought it was also cool learning about the ones that, like, didn't make it or that failed. What was it that I
Yeah.
mentioned, like, was Pompeii or, like, Atlantis?
Yeah,
I
Pompeii,
was like,
Atlantis,
"Oh,
that
it's
all those
scary,"
little
like, the
tidbits are
idea
so
of that. It
cool.
was little things like that. I was like, "That's
Yeah.
cool," like, to imagine that this is the reality of it, of why
Yeah.
those cities became what they did. Hey, the
Yeah.
cities they became. Sorry.
Yes. No, I agree. I love it when like those sort of like pop culture not pop culture, like those like Atlantis, like the story of Atlantis, it's like one of those like
Yeah.
cool sort of mysteries that like, like sort of like a legend that like it would be so cool if it was actually real, but like
Yeah,
so
and
like
it's like
seeing
you see her
representations
take
of
on
them
it.
in, yeah, is
It's
so
like, I'm gonna
cool.
start
I
going
love it.
around and saying, "This is why Atlantis doesn't exist. This is why you don't this is what happened to it."
Yeah.
You gotta read this book.
Um, oh, we need to talk about this. So Hannah's like, I was sad when we didn't see Manny fight the train worm. When he
Right?
turned into sorry, King Kong, I lost it.
I was I that this is what that was one of those where I was like, "What did I just read?" It was one
Yeah,
that was one of
what
the
is
moments
going
where I was
on?
like, "What did I just read?" And this is
Yeah.
actually not that scene. I know we wanna talk about that, but another, like, scene where I was like, "What am I reading?" It was when he was tossing out the money to, like,
Oh yeah.
kill the little tentacles. It was just, like, these
Yeah.
really bizarre things and but yeah, the King Kong, I was like,
So funny.
"Wow."
Yeah, I love how like, well, with the money scene at least, like I love that that one was like sort of like a metaphor for like,
Yeah,
the
there's
way that
definitely some
Manhattan is.
commentary there.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was so interesting. But like I feel like the King Kong thing was just like total fan service and like just like a fun thing she wanted
It
to
was
throw in and
just
she threw it in.
it was so chaotic in a
Yeah.
great way, and I'm also I love some King Kong or
Yeah.
Godzilla or anything like that, so to
Hmm.
see to see that was fun. What was something
Yeah.
else that came up, like, towards the end that was, like there was something else as it'll come to mind eventually, probably as I
Hmm.
read more of these comments. Um,
Ooh, we have confirmation from Sheridan. It is a
okay,
series, and she's currently working on book 2,
there
which
you
has
go.
me excited. Oh, I want to know more now. I'm very interested. Yeah. Um. Ooh. Okay, we need to get into this because
Mhm.
Staten Island is a whole conversation in this
Right?
book.
From page 1 of how does she go? Iceland? That's how
Island.
she
Yeah.
right? That was her name?
Yeah. Yeah. From
Yeah.
page 1, she was a character, but she was like a character I could like so vividly envision because
Yeah.
like it's like very much based off of real people and stuff in real communities. Um, and so yeah, I agree with Katie here. I actually really liked sort of the way things ended with Staten Island about how Iceland like just never ends up joining them and
Yeah.
never ends up agreeing with them, um, and sort of like how polarized the different parts of New York are. Um,
That
yeah, I
definitely
thought that
gave
was
me,
really
like, a
interesting.
lot of food for thought because I was wondering the whole time, I
Mhm.
was like, I don't we're talking about the clashing that kind of came up, and like she was the epitome of that. Like I was like, I
Mhm.
don't know if this is gonna fit in with their group. And
Yeah.
then it's like, what's the solution? And so, her ultimately for like just not even being included, uh yeah, it just gave food for thought. I was like,
Mhm.
I see like the metaphor in that, and like the like
Yeah.
what's kind of like the commentary on that, which I thought was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Um Let's see, with
Yeah,
this
and it
part, but accepting an outside city just didn't make sense to me. That was interesting how, like, at the
mm,
last minute, it's like
it
Jersey
was
City.
Jersey. Yeah. Which
But yeah.
I personally found that part hilarious, just because of the way I, like, heard like, I know a lot of people from New York, including some coworkers and stuff, so just, like, knowing the way that people talk about New York and Jersey also, um, I just thought it was, like, a funny thing to have
Like, funny.
included Jersey in the end because, like, New Yorkers are always like, "Oh, it's Jersey," kind of thing, they're not New
Mhm.
York. But really they are sort of quite related, and there's so many people
And
from
what
Jersey
and
who
I'm
are
blanking
constantly
on
in
the
New York.
map, but was it not closer, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's
they did
closer.
mention that I swear I, like, highlighted that. It was like, yeah, Jersey was
Like, it's closer anyway,
closer,
so
so it made sense. Yeah, so not to New Yorkers because we're assholes about it. This is the quote. Sorry, I'm not swearing.
No, you're
But to everyone, everybody else, the whole world accepts that. But because to most people with sense, a city that's in spitting distance of Manhattan,
yeah,
closer even than Staten Island, might as well be New York.
yeah.
Yeah, that was the
I
quote,
remember
which
that
I
exact
loved.
line too. I was like,
Yeah,
they're making points here.
yeah.
They're
So
making
I
points.
thought it was a fun twist. Yeah.
And it's funny for Staten Island, I kind of got the vibe from the beginning, like you can just tell from the views that she had and like her dad's views. It was like they're
Mhm.
very like they seemed very unchangeable. Like and especially as it went on,
Mhm.
and we were seeing more of how she like
Mhm.
thought of foreigners and just like the racism that was like
Yeah.
dominating her mind. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't see how anything's gonna change here unless something
Yeah.
drastic happens. But like even then, it's like I
Yeah.
don't know. It just goes to show like there's only so much
Yeah,
you can
there's only
do.
so much you can do. Yeah. There we go.
So,
No,
yeah.
I totally agree. Like, one thing I actually really enjoyed about having Staten Island and, like, Iceland in the book was reading from her perspective,
Mm.
um, because it's awful,
Yeah.
and seeing the way that she sees everyone was so interesting. Like, it was awful to read, but it was interesting just to
Yeah.
see, like, how she viewed all of them and the prejudices that she had and, like, just all of this and sort of
Mm.
how unwilling she was to sort of change. And I feel like, yeah, it would have been really sort of dishonest and, like, unbelievable if she had just suddenly changed by the end, even though she's, like, this
Exactly.
very different person. So I feel like it was very much like the realistic version
Mm.
of what would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, now that we're getting into like some of the characters, I would love to hear from everyone who is your favorite character, maybe least favorite character. How do you feel about all of them? I've seen a few people talking here about Padmini.
Mm.
Really like Padmini, but she's barely featured. I agree with this. I mean, I was super excited when she like dropped in. But
Mm.
I do agree she was like not as much of a focus.
Mm.
And I think someone says this a little bit later on. Yeah, it became the Bronca and Brooklyn show at some parts. Yeah, and also sort of the Manny show. I feel like I do feel like those
They
three
did.
were like the main three, which is fine. I mean, when you're writing a book and like sort of trying to focus on a narrative and make feel everyone like get the driving force of the story
Yeah.
forward, you
I
sort
feel
of
yeah.
have to focus on some rather than the
It's a
other.
pretty big cast, and I
Yeah,
like sometimes not everyone can get as much love as the other, and so like it
yeah,
happens.
yeah.
Honestly, maybe I'm just biased because we got
Hmm.
their perspective like right after the prologue, but I really liked Manny's character, like his
I
like
agree.
their POV from the beginning, like from when they were like they didn't know what was going on, didn't know their name, like from the beginning, I was very hooked onto their chapters. So
Yeah,
I liked
agreed.
theirs.
Yeah,
And at the
interesting.
beginning with like his roommate when everything
I was just
I
about to
that
click on this comment.
was
Yeah, I totally agree.
I know. I was wondering if they're gonna like these random people who would also see these things.
Mm,
I was like, what's
yeah,
they're gonna
I
go
loved
forward
how we
in life
got.
so lost.
Yeah, exactly. No, I loved how Madison shows up again at the end. That felt
Yeah,
like a
it's
really
okay.
nice full circle
Mhm.
moment. Yeah, 'cause she shows up. Because I agree, Manny was a great character, and I feel like I didn't really get into the book until he showed up. Like the
Mhm.
prologue felt really confusing to me, but the second
Yeah.
Manny showed up and he was trying to figure out what's going on, it sort of feels like us, getting into the book and we're
Yeah.
like, what's going on? I don't
And
know this
you
place.
know what? You're
Tell
so
me.
right. Maybe
Yeah, and I
that's
feel like
why
that's part of why
you're
she did
so
it.
right.
The character who doesn't know what's going on needs to be taught everything, needs to be taught about New York, and we are
You're right.
that character. Yeah. I loved it. And I also loved it's just while we're on the topic of Manny, because I feel
Yeah.
like I want to go through each character and unpack them. But um yeah, it was so interesting, the commentary on like Manhattan, and her talking about the history of it and how that sort of affects Manny as a person. And we get into this like there's different parts of the book where everyone sort of looks at him and thinks he's like a certain race or
Mhm.
ethnicity or like
Yeah.
whatever. And everyone's sort of confused and no one can sort of pin it down, but it's because of the history of Manhattan and the mix of
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like wasn't there like a particular part that kind of like really described that? And I was like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
that fits perfectly. I think someone else had said, like, I like how
mhm,
their personalities seem to kind of match
yeah,
their borough, which I thought was really unique.
yeah,
But especially like Manny was like the epitome of that. Because it
yeah,
was like that the entire novel. No one could play like it was always like that question, like, oh, not sure. He kind of looks like this, mixed with this, or he looks more like
yeah,
this. That was the entire
yeah,
book. And so that was like
yeah.
an excellent point.
Yeah, and just like the way she sort of decided to think about these things. And she also, I think there's also a line about how Manny being Manhattan is like he's sort of whatever you want him to be. Like people
Mm,
coming to Manhattan, it can be whatever you want it to be kind of
mhm.
thing. It's the city that never sleeps. Like it's, what
Yeah.
you imagine, what you dream of, which I love sort of the metaphorical aspect
Right,
of
there's
that
a lot of,
as
like, little
well.
metaphorical bits in there. That again, it's like
Yeah.
I wish I had this book physically to, like where I had the like,
Yeah.
my own copy to annotate 'cause,
Hmm.
um, I do just think there's, like, a lot of moments that I still, like, follow along with, like, a little reading
Yeah.
journal because I can't help it, like, I have to take some notes.
Yeah.
My brain just, like, doesn't
Exactly.
let me not take a note, but yeah,
Um,
there's some really, like, poignant parts of the story that just sit there and be like, think over what she said.
Yes, exactly. I'm just trying to find this one quote because I feel like it really wraps up. Well, it doesn't include Manny's character, but it includes a bunch of the other ones. So it's that part where Staten Island like basically tells them all to get off her lawn,
Oh,
and like uses her power and like teleports them like the way off. And then the quote goes, and because belonging is quintessential to Staten Island, as toughness is to the Bronx, and starting over is to Queens, and weathering change is to Brooklyn. And because they stand upon Eisen's ground where she is Staten Island, and her will becomes supernatural law, and she like kicks them out. But I loved how she sort of sums up all of them
yeah,
belonging for Staten Island, toughness for Bronx, starting over for Queens, weathering change for
yeah.
Brooklyn. And each of their characters embodies all of those things. It was so interesting. And we can talk about like a specific character if you want to delve into one. Who do you want to go
Well, you reminded me
first?
of, like, with that scene, but, the part 2 where, this is another one of those where it's, like, when they were fighting and it was, like, the city itself was doing the fighting, when they described, like, the
Hmm.
claws in
Yes.
like, you remember that? I was like, "Oh my gosh," she left, like, literal just I
Yeah.
don't know how to describe it, like, literal claw marks in
Marks.
the
Yeah.
landscape that I thought that was just another one of those things where it's, like, the imagery alone, I was just thinking,
Hmm.
"This is something else."
Yeah. They're like leaving their mark on
Mhm.
the city.
Yeah.
So interesting. Um, I'm just trying to go through all of the
Let me see if there's
oh,
any
okay.
quotes too while we look at some of the comments.
Yeah. So Hannah says really loved Bronca. We rarely get older characters being the lead.
Ah,
Totally agree with
right?
this.
I
Yeah.
feel like that was also part of what made the group diverse is it's not just race that makes something diverse, or
Yeah.
sexual identity or anything. It's like seeing the different ages.
Yeah.
Like I really appreciate that, getting like a
Yeah.
variety of ages as main characters in
Yeah.
a story, not
Exactly.
just the side character, not just the parents. Um,
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
yeah,
It was really cool. Yeah, she's like much older. She's like she's got grandkids and she talks about her
yeah,
grandkids, but she was also indigenous, I think Lenape,
mm,
from what I remember. She's also queer. And it was just so cool
that
sort of seeing her as like
intersectionality.
this, yeah, and also like just seeing her having lived through so much, I think,
Yeah,
as like this marginalized person was so, so cool. And like her being so old versus like Padmini, who's like 25, I think, and like Manny and the like general avatar of New York, I think he's pretty
yeah,
young
he's
too.
young.
Yeah. So yeah, as you said, like the difference in ages, and then like Brooklyn, she had her kids, and she was like a different age as well.
Yeah.
It was definitely super cool. Um,
I
I
really like Bronca. How
yeah,
old because of how young she was acting.
yeah, so much energy. Yeah, she was. Yeah, a lot of people loved Bronca as well. Oh, we have some Vanessa and Brooklyn faves. Yeah,
uh,
they were also great. I actually really loved Vanessa because she was just like always there and like
right?
cracking a side remark, you know what I mean? Like
That's what I think made
just
it extra
commenting.
fun when she like
Yeah,
literally became a city too. It was like, you
yeah,
know what, you deserve. You're literally there like the
honorary
whole time.
member.
You're so
Yeah, which
like
is
it's
like
just
sort of
poetic.
like Jersey,
Hmm.
just always there.
Yeah,
I don't know, I just thought it was funny.
always nearby.
Um,
No, I
yeah,
completely agree.
yeah, she was so fun. Um, let's see. I don't know that I have a least favorite because even the women in white in Iceland were well written and made you love to hate them. Agreed.
It's very
Everyone was so well
interesting every
written.
time she made an appearance, or the woman in white, and like the description even of how she looked. Also, just the description of like little tendril things, kind of funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but weren't there like several times where it's like her face looked different, or there's the moment where
Hmm.
her face was blank, and like that, there was
Yeah,
like a split moment. I was like, "Ooh, that's creepy." I like it.
yeah, yeah. It was so strange. There was like a lot of these like weird surreal moments in the book, but
Mm,
also like moments where she's embodying something that is like very real in our world.
mhm.
She is like that woman who offers the big check at the center to
Yeah.
like take down this art and put in this like really horrible art by these white guys. Or she's the woman, I think she's part of the foundation who is like stopping Brooklyn or taking away Brooklyn's home,
Mhm.
and closing things in New York. So like the
Mhm.
embodiment of like this sort of enemy or
Yeah.
um thing was so so interesting. And
One
I
of
think Sao
the
Paulo and
things. Hmm?
oh yeah, go ahead.
I know you're good, but I can't remember. I I I think I'm like jumping all over the place, but like also just
Yeah.
like the gentrification that kept like she
Hmm.
kept like the
Yeah.
commentary, and I remember from the beginning, like I can't remember if it was Manny or if it was the primary avatar who like would look at the main store chains with like
Hmm.
wrongness and that versus like
Yeah.
the mom and pop shops. I was like,
Yeah.
ooh,
Yeah.
ooh.
I agree. Yeah, that was great. I'm just gonna scroll down here. Um, oh, I love this. Just because someone is
I
older
was just
doesn't mean you're
laughing.
gonna be a sweet week, Kenny. I love that. Highlighted so much, several pages of my copy are just
Yellow.
yellow. Yeah, so much to unpack. Uh, yeah, there's so much that we could go through, and we are nearing time, so I'm gonna start wrapping us up. But
It doesn't even
um,
feel like it. Wow.
I know. I feel like we've like barely scratched the surface of this book. Um, yeah, I would love to hear like anyone's like sort of final thoughts as we're sort of wrapping
Yeah.
up. Um, what do we like what stood out the most to us? I mean, I know we talked about like our favorite things, but like what is like the thing that
Mm,
like stays with you after reading this book? The thing that you'll be like thinking
that's
about
a good
for
question.
days and weeks.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like this comment that just came in. Let's
Ooh,
see.
the concept of the woman in white trying to protect the other worlds that die when a city is born was really meaningful. everyone was just trying to save their homes. Yes, thank you for commenting, Ace, because this is something I wanted to talk about and completely forgot about. Yes, because this was actually like a little reveal that we got like closer to the end, I feel like.
Yeah.
And we're constantly seeing rely on the woman in white as like this enemy, but then we start to realize that like she has something she wants to protect too. And even though she isn't
Yeah.
our version of good, she is her version of good.
It is her version.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
interesting. And just like the idea that like these cities being born in like our world were causing the destruction of other ones was
Yeah.
so interesting. And it's like definitely a very sci-fi thing to think
Yeah.
about. Yeah,
With
and I
like
hope
the
you guys
pair,
see that.
like that's gone to like the multiverse stuff. But also is really interesting when it started bringing up like the um how like the birth of the city kind of at the same time kills so many
Mhm.
others, and like
Yeah,
were they willing to sacrifice themselves, like a few
yeah,
for it was just that's where it got a little trippy, where it was like, oh,
yeah.
okay, so
This
the city is doing all
actually,
this.
I don't know if anyone watching has seen the Eternals, the Marvel movie, but
I have not, but that's on my I need to watch
okay.
that.
Okay, because there are aspects of this story that like really reminded me of the Eternals, especially I don't want to spoil
Really?
anything, but there is a reveal at the end of the Eternals, or like midway through the Eternals, um, that sort of drives the rest of the plot forward. That is very similar to something that we get in The City We
Mm.
Became, and it really reminded me of that. And yeah, both of them executed very well, and I just thought it was interesting. So
I'm
if
more
you like the
interested
story,
now in getting to
yeah,
that sooner.
yeah,
Someone,
it
real
was
quick,
good.
someone was mentioning Brooklyn, just some comments about Brooklyn. I was liking what people were saying. Let's see.
Uh,
Um,
yes. Oh, this is a good point. It was like the Better New York Foundation, which we find out is like
yeah.
owned by the enemy. But yeah, I totally agree about this. That was really heartbreaking when I read that part too, and like how she talks about like the history of her family and how they were trying to keep it
Hmm.
for so long, and the amount of work they put into that. Yeah. Um, yes, someone else commented the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, like how if you go back like a few more comments, Amber
Yeah.
Flower Ryan, she was like, the way Brooklyn was so resolute with the being devoured part and caring so much for her daughter. That stood out to me too. Like
Oh,
how they
yes.
like when they realized, like, well, first when that character
Yeah, this
said
is
that,
something I
like,
want to talk
oh
about.
yeah, you guys are you have to wait till the
You're gonna
primary
get eaten.
avatar, devours you or whatever, however they framed it. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
They're kind of like,
But yeah, I
what?
think it was like Sean, he just like says it, and
Yeah,
then Sao Paulo
just
was like,
says
I was
it.
gonna break it to them slowly, like, what are you doing? Yeah.
Exactly. But it was interesting how she was one of the ones who was like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. You gotta do what you gotta do to save the people you love. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, totally agree. I mean, like, and there was also this really interesting aspect of like Manny being in love with the primary avatar,
Yeah.
and like that is a whole discussion I feel like we could
Uh,
have. Um, Whereas like I mean, like Bronco was also like kind of on the fence, and then she's like, I'd do it for, the people here.
mhm.
So it just like depends on the person. But yeah, I agree. Like, um, seeing how much Brooklyn cared for her family was really endearing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there is the
Um,
difference. I think that's one of the good things about have different ages of characters, like some who are
mhm.
parents and some who aren't. Because like I remember at the end, wasn't it Manny who had said like, he doesn't have like the family
Yeah.
ties, like that made,
Yeah.
so I feel like with decisions like that, like with what people are willing
Mhm.
to sacrifice is different
Mhm.
depending on if you have a family, depending on if you have people to go home to and whatnot.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and who you're trying to protect, and who,
Mhm.
if you're just not alone and trying to protect yourself, like, yeah. Oh, which is again one of the plus points of this book. So many great things. Just gonna go through one more time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like we hit a lot of the things. I mean, like, there's all these like little things that I feel like that we could still sit here like for hours on end
Yeah.
unpacking. But I do want to be mindful of time. Thank you everyone for sort of
Yeah.
joining the discussion and all of your wonderful thoughts. You guys are all so awesome and so like forthcoming with your thoughts. And thank you, Livy, for you know,
Sure.
co-hosting and agreeing to this and coming to chat with me.
I'm
This has
more
definitely been
than
a lot of
happy to be
learning
here.
curve. Yes. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed this book. The City We Became, and I hope those of
So
you
good.
who are like still here and you didn't read it, go pick it up if you haven't. I would love to pick up the next book when it comes out, so I will definitely, read it and let you guys know my thoughts when that happens.
Yeah.
I don't have it with me, but our next month's book well, technically this month, March, is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. And we're going to be joined by Hannah from A Clockwork Reader for that live show at the beginning of April. So please look forward to that. And the discussion on Fable has already been switched over, so you guys can start discussing it there. And yeah, thank you guys so much for
Yeah,
being
and
here. I
thank
hope
you
you
for
have a
having
wonderful.
me. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me, and thanks everyone for showing up. Like, it really is a joy to just see all the comments rolling in.
yeah,
Like, if
yeah,
there's any moment where I'm silent, it's because I'm just like, "Ooh, look at all these thoughts rolling in." It's very
yeah.
fun.
I
I
know.
love like a community group like this. This is very
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. And that's been like one of my favorite things, just like actually getting to talk to other people about like
Yeah.
in real time about, something I loved and had fun watching or reading. I don't know what I'm saying. Yes. Thank you guys
Thanks,
for
community.
joining us. Missed the whole talk, but we'll probably watch it later. Yay. Yeah,
Yeah,
if anyone missed
smart.
it, I hope you enjoyed the rewatch. Um, but with that said, thank you everyone and
Yeah,
have a wonderful Friday night. We'll see you
it is
next
right now,
time.
yeah. Yeah. Have a good day,
Alrighty.
everyone.
Bye.